Well, thank you guys for that. It's fun to just listen to you worship. And I'm just going to throw all these pages away to the wind. So my name is Jeff, and I will be here for the week talking about what's about to happen to you. And a couple years ago, Dallas and I were talking, and he asked me if I would come do the first week, which isn't typically my favorite. I love when you guys are all settling in, that kind of thing. But there was a question about just talking to you a little bit about the ideas and the reasons for Joshua and how to make the best use of that time. And since I had an opportunity to get involved in sort of the founding of Joshua, I'll talk about that a little bit later on. There's some insight into what you're about to experience, or at least our hope, what we've been praying for you about. And so as we start tonight, what you're going to have this week is if there were tips that I could give you to make the most of your time while you're here, that's what we're going to talk about this week. And it's not so much like a parent, though I've been one. I have 5 kids. And they are all adult children now. In fact, I have 23 grandchildren. So if you do the math, that means I was born in like 1930 and have been having kids ever since. But I've been married for 43 years and have a beautiful wife. Normally she comes when I get an opportunity to speak. You would get a chance to meet her and you would want to spend time with her, and I would say, no, that's my job. But we're having a blast just doing life and going forward that way. We can talk about that kind of stuff another day. Tonight, I want to just simply dive in by talking about the concept of what you have in your hands, what you have before you, this idea of this experience that you're about to go through. You have the ability to just coast right through it, have a fun time, have a lot of memories, make some new friends. All kinds of things are going to happen this year. But there's something else that's happening as well, and that's the part I want to focus on. And with that in mind, we're going to start first and foremost by simply going before the Lord in prayer. Will you bow your heads? Lord, I just thank you for each of these students, these men and women who have committed basically a year of their life to focus on you, to slow down where life normally just takes off and sends them in a million directions, to stop and say, Lord, I'd love to have you point that direction to me. Lord, I would ask that not just tonight, but in the weeks and months to come, that you would speak clearly to each of their hearts. That even the hearts that might be distracted and might be hardened, that you would already begin softening, that your Spirit would be speaking to each of us about what your desires are, what your will is, and Lord, that we would hear you. And we ask these things in your name. Amen. All right, right off the bat, I don't know how many of you saw this story in the news just over the last week or two, but a lady found, she was in New Hampshire, she's going thrift store shopping, and she finds a painting that she thinks that looks pretty cool. And so she takes that painting and she hangs it on the wall for a little bit and then eventually puts it into a closet, and then she brings it back out. And as she looks at it, she thinks, this painting looks like it should be worth something. Like it's pretty cool. It's just like whoever painted it, and she can tell it's real paint on there, not a print. But she paid $4 for it, so it can't be worth anything. But she takes it to an appraiser and says, hey, I'm just looking at this and I'm just wondering, is this anything? And the person looks at it and says, yeah, in fact, let me call a couple of other appraisers. They look at it, and tomorrow that painting is going to be auctioned for potentially $250,000 for $250,000. And it was $4. Now, I know that right now all of you want to go thrifting tomorrow because it's like those kind of finds are out there. But this question is the one that I want to put out right off the bat. It's the idea that there's something valuable that we have that we do not understand its value. that she owned that painting for years, had it on the wall for a while and enjoyed it, and then put it into the attic and just went, whatever, I don't really care about it. It doesn't mean that much to me, but tomorrow it's going to mean an awful lot to her because the value is suddenly realized by somebody else. They stop and say, what you have here is valuable. So this is me, that older dad kind of person saying, what you have here is valuable. And it may feel like $4 right now, but over time, you're going to look back at it and you're going to realize what it is. If you don't do that, then you will have wasted your time. And so my goal this week is to kind of up the ante of you determining what this value is in what you have. Similarly, things like gift cards. How many of you have right now, somebody gave it to you for graduation, for a birthday, for Christmas, a goodbye going away thing, but they gave you a gift card to something and you have one right now? Yeah, in fact, right now they estimate that the average American has over $185 in gift cards. Now, most of us don't have that much, which means somebody has stacks of gift cards they're not using. But it's that much where literally businesses love to sell gift cards because a lot of times people never cash in on them. It's estimated that it is over $8 billion worth of value on gift cards that are sitting in your dresser or in your purse or in your wallet or something like that. Now, once again, the issue is the value. The idea is that you can have something and you kind of like that you have it. It's kind of fun that you have it. You think someday I might do this, and maybe it's just an In-N-Out burger. Maybe it's clothes. Maybe it's an iTunes card. It could be anything. But you look at it and you think it's sometimes nice just to have it and not actually use it. And once again, you can hear that concept of you have it right now. You're enrolled in Joshua. You're a resident here. You are about to have the experience. The question is will you spend it? Will you actually engage in it? Or will it just sit on your dresser and you will, survive it? You'll just go through it. So that's the question that I want in your head right off the bat. And obviously, there are some things that when we start looking at Scripture in general, we start to find that God lays out some values. I just want you to know right off the bat, I didn't say much about myself, so I'm going to kind of spill some of it along the way. What you need to know about me is that though I had some first jobs, kind of scooping ice cream and delivering newspapers and mowing lawns, things like that. So when I was young, I would do just about anything to make a little bit of money. My first real job was actually coming here to Hume Lake to work in the dish room, washing dishes, flipping pancakes, being an assistant breakfast cook over in Ponderosa Dining. So that's where I started, was right here at Hume Lake. Now, you need to know that one of the reasons why I chose to come to work for Hume Lake wasn't so much because of the ministry. I had come here as a camper all the way down to Wagon Train. I'd slept in the covered wagons as a little wagon train kid. But over the years, I thought Hume would be a cool place to work, primarily because I love the outdoors. I love the mountains. I love to hike and climb. And so I looked at it and said, man, if I could live in the mountains, that would be great. And so to move up here, I'm an introvert. That means that I don't like people. It's rough for me to stand in front and even talk to you. It's because I'm a shy person by nature. But the reality is, coming to the mountains and being able to just hide in my room, go to work. I had a 6 to 3 shift. I'd be at work at 5:30 or 6 in the morning. That was awesome. And by 3 o'clock, I was off and I could go hike the hills. And literally today, that's what I did. I got here early enough that I could go and take a hike today and went off into the mountains. That's my jam. I love that. So to come to work at Hume was a great thing. It wasn't so much fancy that I got to work for a ministry. It was fancy that I got to work in the mountains. But over time, God started to grab a hold of me. And as he did so, there were different things where he would start pulling me into different directions. So at one point in time, there was we didn't have a church at Hume at the time. And so what we would do is we would have devotions at work that at 10 in the morning, all the staff would meet at the dining hall and we would have a devotional kind of like 30-minute break. And we would all have to take turns doing devotions. Now, me, a shy introvert, I didn't like that. That was just, it rattled me, but I had to do it. But every time that I would do it, people would come up afterwards and go, Jeff, you should do something with your life. I was like, you should do something with your life, and it shouldn't be talking to me about what I should do with mine. And we would have that debate. But God was planting seeds that maybe there was something more than just washing dishes and flipping pancakes. That maybe there was something more that He had made me for, that He could use me for. And I didn't necessarily want to do that, but there was a sense that I began to believe that God had somehow made me to do more than I was doing. And so I just put that aside and went back to work. At the end of the 30 minutes, I'd be back to work. But over time, it was enough that my wife and I had met my wife, we got married, we started to feel like God was calling us elsewhere, so we left Hume, went and got a Bible degree, went to Bible college, and thought I was going off to do other ministry things, and the Lord has a way of just kind of smirking at life, and He called us right back to Hume. And we came back to Hume, and I went back to work in the kitchen, and it was this time commissary guy unloading trucks and delivering food stuff to all the different camps. And that's what I was doing. And it was like, that's great. And I still had an opportunity to raise my family in the mountains. So that was cool. I liked it. But along the way, as I mentioned, I love to hike and climb. I was out climbing on the edge of Kings Canyon with some friends. And one of them was an individual who was up in senior leadership, and he was getting ready to do a rappel down a particular part of the canyon. And as he was tying the knots off, I'm looking at the knots, and it doesn't matter that you know the names of knots, but he was tying us off. We were about to all rappel off of this rope down about 140 feet, and it was using half hitches. Well, I'm not a fan of half hitches. You know, great if you're tying a couch in the back of your truck, but I don't want to hang my life on that particular knot. So I said to him, and this is like a boss to me, I said to him, hey, have you ever seen a figure eight rewoven? It's a completely different knot. And he's like, no, I've not even heard of that. And so I showed him and I taught him how to tie it. And I said, it's really cool because when you put the weight on it, it cinches tight, but it doesn't bind the rope, and you can untie it pretty easily. And it's also the knot that like mountaineers everywhere use to rappel off of. Like, let's try it on this one, you know? And so I'm basically saying, can I please untie your rope so we can tie a new one? And so we did that. I didn't think much about it. But a couple days later, in the program department of Hume, they had lost an outdoor ed instructor, and they needed somebody to teach an outdoor ed class. And they were like, we don't have anybody. And then this boss stops and says, well, that guy in the kitchen knows how to tie knots. What if we did a knots and knot tying class? So they came up to me. I'm in the kitchen working, and they say, can we pull you out of the kitchen and you get to teach knots and knot tying? And I was like, yeah, I'll love to get out of the kitchen. And so that started me teaching outdoor education. And over time, I would end up becoming one of the outdoor education directors and would literally set up the curriculum for 32 different classes. And it was one of the highlights of my career. It was wonderful. It was a great thing. And it started just by knots and knot tying. But what I want you to hear is that every part of my career up to that point in time, and still, has been accidental. It hasn't been something where I stopped and said, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm going to go do. I'm going to go to Hume and I'm going to become an outdoor ed instructor. I didn't even know there was such a thing. And next thing I know, I'm doing it. And it wasn't much longer before they tapped me on the shoulder and said, could you run guest services? And I was like, I'm doing program stuff. I'm getting to work with kids. This is awesome. And now they wanted me to do janitorial stuff. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And they went, no, we think you should. What I didn't realize was they were starting to push me into leadership. And it wasn't much longer after that. Then they called me and said, would you please consider becoming assistant director, and then associate director, and then executive director. And so over 14 years, I was associate or executive director of Hume Lake, all accidentally. There was never a point in time where I said, that's going to be my career path. I want to run a ministry or a nonprofit up in the mountains. But along the way, God sort of backed me into things that he knew were more important for my life than the choices I was making. And so I found myself doing this all the way along, and I could go on and on. There's a lot of details in my life, but you're not here to learn about me. What I want to talk about tonight is just the concept that there is value in you that you don't really know, that you're underselling yourself. Now, there may be a handful of you that are totally filled with yourself. That you're arrogant, that you're prideful, that you're like, no, I totally get how wonderful I am, and you're going to fall and burn, and good luck to you. That's all I'm going to say to that. That it's like there's a point in time that God will test your pride, and it doesn't go well. I think it's far better for us to stop and go, God, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. You've said that, but what do I do with that? That's the question. So let's jump to that passage. This is Psalms 139. And this is this concept of having a perception problem of the value of who we are and what God has done. And we're going to jump in let's do verse 13 of Psalms 139. And David's writing, and he says, "For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb." And just before we go on, I got to stop you because I just kind of slammed you if you're arrogant and prideful. I won't be the last one. That will keep coming. But God values humility. So I feel like I'm on good ground to be able to say, hey, if you've got a problem with pride, bring that to the Lord right now. But probably more often is more of you are like me, where you're not really seeing yourself as I'm a God's gift to everybody, but instead you're looking at it going, I'm not quite sure how I even fit in this world. Some of you probably chase demons in your head and your heart, and you really don't believe much of yourself at all, and you're constantly putting yourself down. And you're going, I'm of no value. And so when we start this passage wants to speak to those of you who think like that. I want you to hear it again. Verse 13, this is David saying to God, "For you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb." That the idea is right off the bat, God has made you all the way down to your inward parts. He knows everything about you. He created you. He had you in mind when he made you. So for you to start tearing yourself down in that regard is part tearing God down. And you don't want to do that. You want to stop and go, God knows more than I do. He's better than I am. He's stronger than I am. He's wiser than I am. And he made me, and he made me with a purpose. But right off the bat, if you haven't gotten it, we have a problem of perceived value of who we are and who God sees us as we are. So that's our problem. All of us have the same problem. So let's move on. I praise you, for I am, this is verse 14, "For I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works." Who's he talking about? What's he talking about? What did God make? Us. So when it says, "I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made, wonderful are your works," he's talking about you. He's basically saying, wonderful are your works. You made me. Wonderful are your works. God does make the world. It's wonderful. Beautiful Sierras. That's gorgeous. Same God that made you. It's pretty spectacular. But here it goes. "My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when I was yet were formed for me, when as yet there were none of them. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God! How vast is the sum of them! If I would count them, they are more than the sand. I awake and I am still with you." And then jump to the very end. Verse 23, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way of understanding." That this is the God who is almighty, eternal, omniscient, omnipotent, that God that is the designer of all of creation, stopped and decided before the foundations of the earth to make you. Do you understand that? That God that made the universe stopped and thought about you before the creation of the earth, thought you up, and said, this is what they're going to look like. This is what they're going to act like. This is when they're going to be born, where they're going to be born, and this is when they're going to be at Hume Lake at Joshua. Oh, he already knew. And he picked this moment. That God, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. You're in that moment right now where you're alive right now. Billions of people have lived and died right now on the earth. Tag, you're it. You're alive. He's given you a breath. Everybody take a breath. Heartbeat. Can you feel your heart? Somewhere till you find your pulse. If you can't, maybe somebody else get the paddles. We'll try to get you back to life. This is the concept that you have life right now given to you by an eternal being who thought about you eons before you even breathed your first breath. There's some value there. Now, if you're still in Psalms, jump forward to Psalms 90. In Psalm 90, there's a passage in here where we won't read the whole thing, but we're going to jump in at verse 3 here. And in Psalms 90, David once again speaking, and he says, you return man to dust, and say, return, O children of man, for 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed, and in the evening it fades and withers. For we are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before our secret sins in the light of your presence. For all our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or even if by reason of strength 80, yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you? All right, so we just went up to the heights of you've been created by an eternal being. You're wonderfully made. This is awesome. You're alive right now. That's great. And now we're reading, but you're going to die. That breath you just breathed won't be long, and that'll be your last one. And tag, now you're out of it. And that's it. So you were bookended in this sense that the value of being alive should mean something to you. We know it's true that we're all going to die. There has not been a person before you, with the exception of two people. Who were they? Enoch and Elijah. The only two people we know that have escaped death. Everyone else has lived and died. How many of you think you're going to live and not die? Yeah, right. We know it, but we live as if it's not going to happen. David says this, but then I want you to catch this very next verse in verse 12 of Psalms 90. So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. So the first part of the verse, teach us to number our days. Joshua, this program going to run forever? It's not even going to run 5 years. It's not going to run 2. It's not even a full year, is it? The clock's already running. You guys have already spent a big chunk of your time. You might as well start packing. It's over. No, you got to number your days. You got to stop and realize you're in it right now, but it's already getting spent. It's already getting spent down. And he stops and says, Lord, just because I know that you've made me wonderfully made, but you've also said there's an end to my life. In between is this season, the part between the dash. It's the dash between the numbers. You've heard that before on a tombstone. That's your life. Well, right now you're in a little segment of it, and you have days that you will be here. So we're going to talk about now how to make the most of that time, the time you have. Not that you're going to die when Joshua ends, let's hope, but it's the idea that even while you're here, this program will come to an end. You'll move forward with another part of your life. What you are busy at right now is what this program can provide for you, what you can do with it, and you can be flippant. I can't even say the word. Flippant. Yeah, there you go. You can either be flippant about it and drift with it, or you can stop and say, you know what, I'm going to number my days. I'm going to take advantage of this, and I'm going to make the most of this time. Because what it can do is it can prepare you for a future that God has already planned for you. And you can be a part of getting your soul ready for what he has in mind for you.